Registration is open for the 2022 AMSN Convention. Join us September 29th through October 2nd, 2022 in San Antonio, Texas, or virtually. Attendees will have the opportunity to earn up to 38 NCPD contact hours, explore education sessions across 6 tracks, and make new connections. Head to convention.amsn.org to register. That's convention, convention.amsn.org.
My name is Alissa, and on behalf of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses, I'm very excited to welcome you to this episode of med-surg Moments, the AMSN podcast. This podcast is an engaging look at the lives of and surrounding medical surgical nurses. We have guests from all backgrounds and every corner of our industry, bringing you insightful and heartwarming stories that are relatable and compelling on a variety of topics. In 2020, the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses recognized that urgent change was needed to address the issues of racism and inequity that exists in nursing and America's healthcare system. In response, AMSN created and launched a sweeping initiative to provide education and awareness to nurses and healthcare professionals across the industry. AMSN's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusiveness initiative formally launched in March of 2021 with a goal to open the conversation and drive change. In this episode, we begin a 3-part series focusing on AMSN's DEI initiative, and with us today is Robin Hertel and Shermel Edwards-Maddox. Robin is a past AMSN president who presently serves as a nursing publishing training coordinator for Ascend Learning. She also serves on the board of directors of the Nursing Organization Alliance. Shermel is a registered nurse who presently serves as professor of practice at the University of Houston. Robin and Shermel, you've both been instrumental in these efforts, and it's truly my pleasure to welcome you to med-surg Moments.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Hi, Alissa. Thank you for having us.
Yes. So we'll just jump right in and ask what precipitated this launch of AMSN's DEI initiative, and how did you get involved?
In the first 8 months of 2020, violence against people of color just really seemed to explode in the news. We saw riots, and the disparities and inequities that exist in our society really became front and center to all of us, not just those that were experiencing it firsthand. Additionally, the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic saw increases in violence against American Asian Pacific Islanders, and we saw continued violence against members of the LGBTQIA+ population. Now, if all of this weren't bad enough, the nurses were also experiencing trauma because we were caring for these victims of violence. There's a physical and emotional and a psychological pain that's associated with experiencing or witnessing such blatant racism and violence. The symptoms are really similar to post-traumatic stress disorder in a way. Nurses told us about experiencing secondary trauma manifestations like increased heart rate and nightmares, feeling like they were on edge constantly. We heard our colleagues talk about experiencing depression and feelings of distrust and just being unsafe. As members of a helping profession, we couldn't stand by and not take action. So Terry Hinckley, who is the AMSN CEO, and myself, who was president at the time, had several long discussions. And we really knew that we wanted to do something significant. We talked with other members of the board, and we really felt that we had a responsibility to stand up, to speak up, and to take action. So in June of 2020, we released a statement on our website of our commitment, of AMSN's commitment to end racism. In the document, we committed to 4 different actions related to acknowledgement that racism exists, engagement, working with others to address these issues, advancing policy, and educating nurses. We recognize that racism harms people, their health, and really the health system as a whole. So the board members of the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses and the Medical Surgical Nursing Certification Board all posted our own personal pledges on that website as well. And then we invited members to post their personal pledges. So to date, we have more than 100 nurses who have posted personal pledges against racism. And that's really how it got started, with just that simple pledge saying, we know this happens, but we're going to do something about it.
That's all it needs to start, right? It's acknowledging that there's a problem. What is the mission of this DEI initiative, and how are you able to gain that buy-in for this initiative?
The DEI initiative is really reflective of AMSN's overall mission in our commitment to quality patient care through professional development, through certification, scholarship, and advocacy. The initiative itself seeks to promote DEI through education, critical conversations with and among our membership, research, advancing opportunities for underrepresented nurses through scholarship, and advancing opportunities for underrepresented nurses, coaching and mentoring them in order to achieve leadership positions. Because right now there is really an inequity in the number of nurses of color who are in leadership positions. Now, although the board was really supportive of this type of initiative, they really took the time to ask some hard questions. We wanted to be sure to define the work that we were going to do. We wanted to establish metrics and deliverables. And we wanted the initiative to have a broad scope, but yet be manageable. We realized that we couldn't do everything that we wanted to do. We also wanted to take a hard look at ourselves, at the organization and our processes and how we work towards making everything equitable and using the correct language. And so that's what we used for the development of the charter.
So what are those areas of focus in the charter then?
The charter seeks to increase awareness and promote conversations around the following topics: racism, ageism, sex and gender, sexual orientation, people with disabilities, and religion and culture. Our work in these areas encompasses multiple mediums: blog postings, webinars, journal publications, interviews, podcasts, and convention sessions. In addition, we are developing a certificate-based program that covers each of these topics individually.
When you say disability, does that also cover ability? Because really what I'm thinking about is not just people who have disability that is obvious, but like mental health is what it comes to mind because that's a disability, but you can't see someone who might be suffering from a social anxiety or a mental health issue.
Disability, while it may be very public, in some cases, in a lot of events, it isn't. Here's a classic example. I'm completely deaf in one ear. I have a disability, but I don't generally tell people until now.
Right. How will this one be different from other initiatives that are out there? What's AMSN doing differently?
We all have certain tasks that all of the DEI initiatives, regardless of whatever organization you're looking at, has. And they're all quite similar in a way. What sets AMSN's initiative apart is that the board of directors has integrated DEI throughout each of the goals of AMSN's strategic plan. This is not a one and done deal. DEI has become a part of the living, breathing document of what AMSN is, who they represent, and the work that we do on a daily basis.
I like hearing that being threaded into the fabric of who AMSN wants to become. So, Shermel, you're being a little strong and silent type. You're a member of the task force. What inspired you to volunteer to do this work?
So early 2021, AMSN put out a call for volunteers to serve on the task force. And as a nurse of color who has experienced racism within the workplace and beyond, I thought this would be a really great way to get involved and be part of a movement to invoke change. For so long, I had accepted kind of that this is just what it was. And it wasn't something I had previously discussed out loud outside the walls of my home. So I found this opportunity and this platform within the task force to be a safe place to be able to explore those feelings and kind of figure out how we can move forward, not just say this is a problem, but then what are we going to do about it?
That's really awesome. Can you tell us more about the e-module you guys created about race?
Sure. So it's broken down into 4 major segments that kind of explore the differences between implicit and explicit biases, systemic racism and its history, types of racism, how racism affects nurses and how it affects patients, and the need to address barriers to diversity and leadership, kind of what Robin mentioned earlier. And then we actually finished the module with actionable items that nurses can take to kind of change their work environment, advocate for themselves or for a colleague who is experiencing racism, and ways that they can get involved to help make changes at the local, state, and even national levels.
When you wrote this module, were you guys able to bring in some of that personal experience to try and convey and connect with the learner more?
Definitely. And I think there are some shared stories. I know we all reached out to contacts. Some of them are stories that I've experienced. Some are stories from members. It's all drawn from real experience, which, is unfortunate, but really helps us illustrate what's happening. And I also think exploring the history, we didn't wake up in 1990 and this was a problem. Really, it went back like BC era. This has been ongoing. And so I think there's a lot of guilt and shame sometimes around people thinking, oh, I've been a part of this, but this was here, if you will, before we got here. And so it has been perpetuated throughout the centuries and, of course, generations. But hopefully some of that shame and guilt can be let go and we can figure out how to change the sails and go a different way.
I think it is really important what you just said. While we were brought into this situation, it's an opportunity for us to change it and not contribute to it. Like, hey, we recognize it, right? And identifying it's that first step. I'm curious, which one you guys think will have the greatest impact taking action or changing the attitudes of people through this initiative?
I do think it's both. Once you get a fundamental understanding, then the walls come down. Because I think if you really walked up to someone on the street corner and you said, hi, let's have a conversation about race, immediately walls go up. They could not have a racist bone in their body, but just the word race and racism, and you're a person of color asking someone else who's not a person of color that question, it's just immediate defense. And they haven't probably done anything. But it's just that I think having an understanding and letting those walls come down, then we can really get good dialogue out of that. And that's when we can talk about the implicit biases and things that are microaggressions that people don't even realize are microaggressions. And in the module, we do talk about examples of things that you might say that you didn't realize was really a microaggression. And it is. And then we talk about how to handle those too.
Yep. I think that's awesome. Robin, what are you most proud of in this work that you've done?
It's been such an amazing journey of growth for me personally that I find it hard to nail down one thing. But I really do think that overall, I'm proudest that we have started conversations. It's a long journey. Nobody's there yet. Words change and attitudes follow, but starting that conversation and opening the door to let people talk about how they feel is really one of the biggest things for me.
I think you're spot on in terms of opening that door and opening conversation. A lot of people don't have the vocabulary for it. I remember attending a microaggression class here when I first transferred into leadership. I had no idea what that was until I went to that class. And I didn't realize how much microaggression I was tolerating that was coming my way and how I was sending it back, like shooting it out into the universe like it was nothing, right? Because that was just like the culture here and the language that we used. And it was really eye-opening. But like I've said before, once you're able to identify what you're doing and name it, you can tame it. So it was something that I learned about myself. But then in the spirit of DEI, as things are coming out more and we're making more people aware of that, I think that it's helping kind of shine that spotlight on all the things that we say and do to harm each other. A lot of times it's very unintentional. And so if we just know better, we do better.
I agree completely. And those times where we do make those mistakes and we do feel embarrassed and we start to backpedal and then we feel even more uncomfortable. I think the important thing to take away from all of that is to recognize it as an opportunity for growth. Learn something new, and you've got to take it and run and make it a part of who you are.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Anytime we make mistakes, and that's something that I try to share as well, as take that as the learning opportunity. So Shermel, I don't think I asked you this, but what is the contribution that makes you especially proud?
I think what makes me especially proud of this module is that we go beyond saying racism is a problem, and we give actionable items and steps that nurses can take. We actually kind of built in some cognitive rehearsal. How would you respond? Because oftentimes when we are exposed to these microaggressions or even explicit bias, we're in shock, we freeze, and we might want to say something, but we don't know what to say that won't make things worse or escalate it. Or what if it's an authoritative figure? Or what if it's a patient? And so we provide language and kind of prompts of, this is how you can respond if this happens to you. This is how you can respond if you see this happen to a colleague. So it's really about calling out the racism and then calling them in and having those discussions and that dialogue that we've talked about. And I think being able to do that before you're in the real situation may help you feel more confident in stepping up the next time it does happen. So I think that's what I'm most proud about, is that someone who's going to participate in this module is going to walk away with a tool that they can use, either professionally or socially.
Is there any way we can get you to give us a sneak peek of what that might look like or sound like? For example, if someone's recognized their own personal bias for the first time, what would be the best way for them to kind of confront their own personal biases so that they can connect with people in a meaningful way to learn and deepen their understanding?
It's really about calling it out. So I can share with you literally an example that happened not too long ago. There was an Indian nurse that was working with a student of ours, and there was another nurse that came up and said to the Indian nurse, "You people have good eyebrows." And while she thinks she was paying a compliment to this nurse, that was really an example of a microaggression. And so calling it out right there and just saying, "Can you tell me what you mean by you people?"
Yes.
And it's, it's a tone, and it kind of puts it back on them, and they may go, "Oh, maybe they didn't realize they said you people," or
Right.
what you people kind of implies. And so just kind of questioning, "Can you tell me what you meant by that? When you say that, that's kind of offensive to me." And
I love that, because you're approaching with curiosity. So you aren't becoming the aggressor. So you're not contributing to the issue. I love that. That's great.
it allows for dialogue. And then that's something they can take away is, okay, maybe I shouldn't say you people moving forward. And then that's something hopefully they take with them and avoid doing that in the future.
All right. I love that. That is amazing. So you need more tips and tricks like that. Go to the module and find out more. Something as simple as that, but approaching with that curiosity, which, we talk a lot about that just in any kind of conflict resolution, is just approaching with curiosity, trying to clarify, trying to understand. If you ask somebody to clarify, like, what did you mean by you people, and the person is unable to communicate, how would you assist that person? Or is it something where you would just kind of like educate in that moment if you don't have someone who's super receptive to that kind of conversation?
Yep. So in the module, we talk about calling it out. And our question is calling it out. Like, what did you mean by that? Because that is saying, okay, this is a red flag. Something is wrong with what was just said. And again, if they're not able to articulate, that might just be kind of the door opener to the education, and just saying that was offensive to me, letting them know that, that language is not okay. And then maybe helping them figure out how to communicate what they were trying to say in a different way, or saying the use of this word means this in this culture, or just kind of explaining where they went wrong. Because if you don't know, then you don't know.
Then you don't know. If you're unable to approach people, like, I want to ask questions and I want to approach with curiosity, but I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing, how can I open that dialogue?
I would say definitely not in the moment. If this person has just experienced a microaggression, that might not be the best time and place to get that education, or, in that moment. There are times where you really do put in the effort and nothing changes. And so there's exhaustion that comes with that, especially when you have these things with like George Floyd and all these things happening so blatantly. It's exhausting. It's incessant. It seems like it never stops. And so that's just one more thing on my to-do list, is now to share with you, this is how it should be. So I think timing is important, and finding someone who is willing to share that. And it's all in how we question. But definitely, I wouldn't say in the moment of the microaggression is probably not the best time to want to do that.
That definitely makes sense. It would sound like in the moment, we're going to focus on clarifying our intention and probably making the amends that is warranted as necessary. And then if I'm hearing you, then finding another opportunity to maybe reapproach. And if possible, if that person is open and receptive to like, yes, let me help you understand whatever. I do understand that it's not my job to educate you, because sometimes I do feel that way about being in a bigger body. It's like, it's not my job to tell you I'm allowed to take up space, just as many rights. So I feel that.
In the module, we do have a list of do's, and then we also have a list of don'ts. And so I think that that's a great place to start with, kind of figuring out, okay, here's what I do say, but here's what I don't say. And then, if what you were going to say is on that don't list, that maybe we try a different way to revise the question. And I think leading with curiosity in the right timing is important. And it needs to come from a supportive place. If you just want to know because you want to know, versus I want to support a colleague, or I have a neighbor or something. If it comes from a place of support, I think most people are willing to do that and share that with you. So I think it's about timing and maybe following some of those do's and don'ts suggestions from the module.
Well, if our listeners want to know what that is, they're going to go to the module and find out. I think that's great. All right. Well, lastly, I'm just curious how working on this has influenced the way you guys do your work now.
It has definitely helped me be more confident in standing up as a professor. I also impart that into the students that I work with. I work with nursing students that are going to go out into the field. And so just this past semester, we had a student advocate for herself. She was doing her clinical rotations with a nurse on a unit, and this nurse made consistent microaggressions towards her, racial microaggressions towards her. And she stood up for herself. And we were super proud of her because there was a power dynamic. She's a student, he's the preceptor. And so it was really powerful for her to be able to do that. And when she told me, we immediately got leadership involved, and we reached out to the organization, who then removed that nurse from their duties. And that's not our aim, is to get anyone in trouble, but there was definitely a no tolerance around that behavior. We felt that way. The organization felt that way. And it really empowered this nurse, who said to me, I could do this again. I could stand up for myself again. And I feel more comfortable standing up if I see this happening somewhere else. And so that was a really powerful moment. So my goal is to keep imparting into others, especially new nurses, as they head out into the workforce, that we advocate for our patients, but we also need to advocate for ourselves.
That is really awesome. What about you, Robin?
I agree a lot with Shermel. Working with this area, it just kind of infuses into the rest of your life, into the people that you work with on a daily basis, into the work that you do and produce. It has led to some very difficult conversations with family members. And because of this work, I've been able to kind of take a step back almost and see this from a less emotional aspect when things tend to flare, so that I can approach it more rationally and hopefully have a productive conversation.
Well, and I think that is very important. We have to keep that rational side of our brain functioning if we're going to make any progress and really learn and develop and grow. For those of our learners who are interested in finding these modules, where should they go?
They can check out the AMSN.org website. Under Learning and Development, there is AMSN Elevate series, and you will find the DEI modules there.
Well, Robin and Shermel, we have reached the end of our time, but it has truly been a pleasure having you on this important episode of med-surg Moments. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We look forward to connecting with you on our next episode of med-surg Moments, the AMSN podcast. We'd also like to remind you to become a member of AMSN or renew your membership at www.amsn.org. You will receive lots of cool benefits and perks, such as discounted pricing on the annual convention and continuing education. We look forward to connecting with you on the next episode of med-surg Moments, the AMSN podcast. In the meantime, we want to hear from you. Send us your questions, topic ideas, and feedback to amsnpod@amsn.org. That's amsnpod@amsn.org. We encourage you to help us spread the word and subscribe to med-surg Moments podcast via your smartphone podcast app to receive notifications of future episodes. Please be sure to leave a review and recommend med-surg Moments wherever you get your podcast to help us reach even more listeners. Until next time, I'm Alissa. And always remember, med-surg Moments is a moment in our lives, a moment in our med-surg careers that makes a huge difference.